We're at an age when the core premises of the major sciences are established. We know how to do specialized research, but what we've lost track of are those broader integrative questions that arise out of the heart of the sciences.
The Foundation has a very distinctive contribution in actually funding not just basic science, there are lots of organizations that do that, but funding the kind of big questions that come out of science. For example, out of matter has come the complexity of life, including consciousness and mind and all these things that we have all around us. We tend to take for granted, but I think raises huge questions about what does that mean? What does it mean to have that kind of drama, if you like, here on planet Earth, in the midst of this vast universe?
For psychology to have make full sense of the human condition, it's fine to keep working on suffering and misery, but we needed a serious scientific basis for talking about strength and virtue, for talking about the enabling conditions of life.
Scientists are really skeptical when they hear about transdisciplinary work, especially when it straddles the humanities and the harder sciences. But what we're discovering increasingly is that it's very fruitful to ask questions in ways that might not be conceptualized within the fields themselves. It's important to listen to different perspectives from outside one's field.
We want the person who thinks about the world one way to come into contact with someone who thinks about the world perhaps a different way and see, are they really at odds? Are there points of contact? Are there ways in which they can meld together and yield a richer picture of the way reality is constructed or not?
Most biologists, they wouldn't talk to theologians. They might even find it distasteful also to do this. But then again, my work with Sarah Coakley has opened many perspectives and many discussions with historians of sciences, with philosophers, with ethicists.
Science is an attempt to understand how the universe works, how do things work. Religion is an attempt to understand what is the meaning and purpose of this world, the meaning and purpose of life, and the meaning and purpose of this world. Well, if it has a meaning and a purpose, that must have something to do with how it works and how it's built. So the two are broadly related. And if we understand one well, that may help us understand the other.
One of the values of this network of bringing these rich interdisciplinary perspectives together is that the scientists are learning from the theologians, historians, and philosophers, and they're learning from us. And having the humanities scholars in the room at the same time, we're forced to consider what is the core question that has plagued us, that we haven't really addressed effectively as a group over at least 1,000 years. And those are interesting questions to grapple with, and they sometimes require that we as scientists develop new tools or implement those tools in a fashion that we wouldn't have been willing to do otherwise.
What is interesting for us is to see that some of the possibilities we are discussing in quantum mechanics have been discussed in the history of philosophy, including Eastern philosophy.
There are certain areas which I think promise enormous excitement. I'm thinking particularly of brain studies, the developments in the neurosciences, raising profound questions about the origins of human consciousness, the question of whether we are as free as we think we are.
I went into science because I was really excited about big questions, trying to understand more about the ultimate nature of reality, how our universe works. And that goes for a lot of my colleagues too. Then we very quickly realized that if that's all we work on, our next job after grad school is going to be at McDonald's. What we're trying to do is give people an opportunity to come back to their first passion.
The big questions that I lie awake worrying about at night are things such as how did the universe come to exist and how will it end? Will it, in fact, ever end? And did it have an ultimate origin? What is the nature of time? Why is it that we perceive time as flowing or moving when in science we can stand back and see that that makes no real sense? What is life? Is life a quirky, irrelevant little aberration that occurred just in one insignificant corner of the cosmos? Or is it a deeply cosmic phenomenon, somehow part of this bigger scheme of things?
We have to carefully check what the fundamental notions are in science, like causality. connectedness of events and things like that. And these fundamental notions, in my eyes, require input of philosophers and maybe other traditions.
The unique contribution that Templeton Foundation makes is rolling the sleeves up and saying, we don't know how this conversation is going to turn out. In some areas there may be harmony. In some areas there may be no overlap and no conflict. In some areas there may be serious conflicts, and you better decide what's the truth, but you can't cling to the truth of both.
There was a time when science wasn't really a separate discipline. Science was a mode of inquiry that would naturally interface with questions that people think about across the board. Issues that poets have struggled with, philosophers have struggled with, theologians have struggled with. At some point in the future, I think thinking about science as something separate will go away, and it will just be an attitude. It will be an outlook on the world that helps you process all of the data that we're inundated with. And that, I think, is something that one day can happen.